What's good? So I've been wanting to make this for a while and talk about this topic. I am no longer a Christian. I don't identify as a Christian. And what I notice is that it seems like a lot of the people that stop being a Christian, that it feels like to me that the whole time the world was over here on the other side, the secular world was over here, showing off what the secular world is about. And it's almost like the former Christians, I'm aware this might put some people off, but it is what it is. Like, they're drawn to and lured away by the world from their faith. Like, something about the world outside of Christianity appealed to them. And, for me though, the world never had any appeal at all. Of course, my background is growing up around alcohol, drugs, and all that stupid shit. And so, and just dysfunctional relationships, just observing all that, not only in my family, but in all the neighborhoods I grew up in, which were trailer parks mostly, and just in general, just watching everybody in the secular world have these crazy lives, and oftentimes miserable too, especially in the trailer parks I grew up in. And so the world never appealed to me at all, but it seems like when other people, it's almost like part of the driving force that made them want to leave Christianity was the enticement that the world had to offer. So what do you get when you leave Christianity and go secular and you no longer living for Jesus, right? Is it the fact that you get to smoke stuff now? Smoke, weed, drugs, fornicate, go hook up with a bunch of people, it's overrated, right? There's never really been anything about the world. The whole thing that got me into Christianity in the first place was just, there I was, 15 years old, and we're cramped up 5 kids in this trailer. Both of my parents are smoking. My dad's an alcoholic, getting drunk every night. And, the trailer's filthy, there's roaches, and then you look over here and you see these Christian people living in nice homes and clean, they got regular jobs, their cars smell new, and they're saying, hey, Jesus is the way, there's a way out of your circumstance. So by definition of the Christian church, the way it's taught is I am the lost. I was the lost. I was an ideal, case for someone to turn to Jesus, right? And so with full heart, I went in, gave my heart to Jesus, and really, really meant it. Now, I'll say this real quick. Today, all those Christians would say that I never did that. It was never real. I've even had some Christians dissect my, they'll try to dissect everything, try to microanalyze what really happened because they're already biased. They already want to conclude that if my life didn't change or turn around, that it must have been because I did something wrong. And so when all avenues have ran out and they can't figure out why, and something in their gut, something in their soul tells them I was never a real Christian, right? And so they have to. So the one that wins, and I hate to have to I hate saying this because the guy that said this, I liked him as a person, right? But we had a lot in common, you know. But at the same time, you know, he dissected it down to Romans 10:9 and 10. And I'm paraphrasing that if thou shalt confess with thy mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in thy heart that God has raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. Right? You know, he boiled it down to, I must have done everything right, but God never saved me because he was sure that when I got saved, I didn't use my mouth. My actual physical mouth. And that's why I experienced poverty and hardship, and why God never chose to reciprocate and come into my life, because I didn't use my mouth, my physical mouth. He's like, that's got to be it. See how ridiculous that sounds? But I never wanted to be part of the world. And so, you know, when I seen all these people that, you know, that believed in God and allegedly loved the Lord and all that stuff, it's like it appeals to me because as a kid, because you know, as a teenager, because like this, Jesus is going to provide me the way out. You know, Jesus is saving me. Jesus is going to save me, and you're promised. See, it's two things. Like, you're told all about these stories about how people suffer because they followed Jesus, right? You're told all these stories about how people will go through suffering. Even in the Middle East, people get beheaded for being, you know, and tortured for following Jesus, getting beat up, tied up, kidnapped, murdered. But at the same time, the church will say, well, if you give your life to Jesus, then all your problems will be solved. And yes, that's the implication. And, you know, even if they don't come right out and say it directly, that's the implication. If you talk to Christians, oh, well, you just need to give your life to the Lord. You know, he's going to solve all them problems. You know, well, you're struggling because, you know, the Lord wants to put you through this so that you will turn to him for all your problems. So it's implied, you know, to resolve all your problems. So it's implied that, you know, that by doing so, by giving your heart to Jesus, then it will resolve all your issues. And simultaneously, they will also proclaim, well, yeah, you're going to go through hardships once you start living for the Lord. So really nothing's changed. Really nothing, you know, in your life is actually going to change, because well, the reality of it is that that's wordplay on their part. Like that's some I'm trying to think of the right word. It's a type of mental mind game where it's like, well, if you're suffering, like, it makes it to where they can just put on any reason that they choose and be selective and cherry pick the reason why. So, you know, like, if you're suffering and struggling, it's because you haven't given your life to Jesus. But then what about after you've truly given your heart to Jesus and you go through suffering and hardship? Well, that's because the Lord is trying to test you. Or, well, that's because, you know, the devil's trying to fight you, and so you need to pray and ask God to help you get through it. You know, he wants you to learn to lean on him during your hardships. So they preach the message. It's kind of inferred, implied that, you know, once you give your life to Jesus, then it resolves all your problems, right? That it is implied that frequently and often. And then simultaneously, it's also acknowledged that you will still go through hardships, because so either way you go, life's going to happen either way, and so it allows them to have selective interpretation for each specific scenario, right? And so and then your socioeconomic status will make you will your socioeconomic status and your perceived value in the social hierarchy in any given group, like in a Christian community, uh, will determine often your what the interpretation of the situation is. Okay, so in other words, you know, I was a poor young man coming out of the trailer park trying to get my life together with no social network, no parents, no help. And so, if I'm going through a struggle, then it's probably because my heart isn't right with the Lord, or maybe low key I'm probably drinking alcohol or doing drugs or something like that, in their minds, or maybe I'm into some kind of a sexual sin, like looking at pornography, or you name it, like some kind of like thing, and therefore I'm caught back up into the world, you know. So if I'm experiencing hardship, that's the reason why, because of who I am, right? That's how they perceive me, right? But if Jimmy over there, who grew up in a nice Christian home, and his great grandfather was a pastor, and his grandparents were missionaries, and his mom and dad, were deacons in the church, and and uh, and were leaders in the church. If Jimmy experienced some kind of weird hardship, then it's because he's right with the Lord, and Satan's just testing him because he's right with the Lord. Different socioeconomic status equals different interpretation, selective interpretation of what the hardship means. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. But anyways, as a young kid, the appeal of church, because I'd walk into those people's houses. At times I'd meet some of the church members, and so be walking into people's houses, and their house smells like a freaking book, like a book from you ever walk into Books a Million, you open the book and smell the pages. Their house literally smelled like a brand new book. It was like a fantasy to me. They lived wholesome, no cigarette smoke, no dysfunctional crap, like. And I legit believe that, because I believe those people were content people, actual content people. And let me explain. Um, there are some people that believe in the faith in their lives. They live decent, good lives, right? They are committed to their belief, but it puts them in a bubble to where they don't have to navigate or encounter any real world problems. So that's the thing. And I went to for example, in this case, an independent little Baptist church. That, independent Baptist means they broke off from the Southern Baptist Convention, and so they were a little independent Baptist church, and it was all about going back to those wholesome family values, and good old living, good old, Christian living, here in the South. I'm sure this applies in other areas too, but it's like where, the man goes to his job. It's almost like a calling back to the 1950s ideal where, and believe me, idealistically, I love that idea. Like, I love the ideal of having a family and having a wife and working and then raising kids, and, and then, assuming that Christianity was real, right? Like, go to church, and, and have a family, and, all that sounds great, actually, but it's also a fantasy too. And it just so happens that some people just, through probability, just fall into a place in life where it just happened that way for them, and so it appears like they built that, when in reality, for the most part, everything was more kind of like aligned for all of that to just organically, naturally transpire, because probability would dictate that, if there's a certain amount of people that believe in those ideals and attempt to live that way, it's going to work out to some extent, or to a full extent for many people that hold those ideals. And so therefore they will attribute their success or their positive outcome as a result of having followed Jesus, when in reality it's just merely due to the fact that probability would dictate that if enough people do it, it's going to happen. So that means that there is legitimately a family out there, even today, that they believe in the Lord, and they say, we're going to live for the Lord, and I'm going to find me a good virgin wife to get married to, and the dude's going to marry that girl, and she waited, and they both believed in the faith, and they were really, truly got saved with their hearts and believed, and they followed God the right way down to the T, and they never did drugs, they never were part of the world, and it's hard for people to believe this, but they legitimately end up living content lives. Now, some people are going to argue and be like, oh no, I know how it really is in those circles, and like, oh, I know that behind the scenes she's like miserable, and her husband, and she's bored, and she's going out of her mind, like, because she's just trapped in this. Yeah, that does happen too. I believe that happens a lot, where they're trying to preserve this whole image and ideal, and then it drives them crazy because you can never, live up to it. However, there are probability would dictate that it does work for some people. It's just probability. I'm not saying anything's wrong with that. It just is what it is. It just is what it is. It's just going to happen. It's just going to end up happening, right? Because of the massive amount of numbers of people that lean into those belief systems, it's going to happen. And I believe that I know people that lived that way and it worked out for them, right? And so it gives them a confirmation bias and a certain survivorship bias that if, oh well, look, we lived for the Lord, and they legitimately believe they've done it right, and they lived right for the Lord, and I know a couple right now that, well, the husband died already, but my main point is like, back in the day, I believe that those were there were people legitimately attempting to live for God, and I believe that they were content. And I consider myself an empath, and you don't even have to think of an empath as an esoteric term or any kind of spiritual term. You can become an empath through trauma, by experiencing trauma and having heightened senses and awareness of people's behavior, right? And so you feel what people feel, and and can, you can feel what people are feeling, and have a lot of street awareness, and so I can tell, most of the time, who's being honest, who's being disingenuous, who's got some kind of emotional agenda or some kind of need to, have like an inner unconscious competition with others. And so people like this couple I'm talking about, and some others, they you can feel it coming off from them that they don't need anything. They're not trying to get anything from you. They're just regular content people. They work their jobs, they live for God, they go to church, they're a happy part of their community. Like, these are the people that are legit. I guarantee you, anybody that's a former Christian, if they're being honest, they can probably pick out that one couple where they are legitimate people, right? And they're cool, um, so I forgot where I was going with that, but anyways, they they kind of live in a bubble, and by being part of their church community, it gives them kind of like a safe space where they can live without having to be out in the world, right? So they don't have to. They limit their engagement into the world. And this is why this appealed to me, because nothing about this world appealed to me. Nothing about the culture. Nothing about, like, you know nothing. Like, but that life appealed to me because they were wholesome. Like, they didn't have to, like, you could feel the energy coming off of them. In other words, like, they don't need, like I was saying, like this couple specifically, and couples like them, they're not trying to get anything out of anybody. They're legitimately trying to live for God and live their lives, right? They're not trying to one up you. They're not trying to flex on you. They're not trying to cause drama or steal or anything from you. And you can feel that they're just genuinely content. And so the people that live that way because they're in that social bubble where they avoid the world. They don't have any major real world problems then. So as a strategy, if you can get enough people to believe in those beliefs strategically, and kind of like through the process of like filtering people out and eliminating people from your social circle, and you have that ideal, you get to experience life with minimal real conflict. So you're kind of coddled. At worst, I gave this story in a post I made where the worst problem they might have is Brother Jimmy was questioning his faith, and so his car broke down, and the tow truck driver, Mr. Witherington, went to go help Jimmy with his vehicle issue or whatever, and they had to get a tow truck, and the tow truck, and they prayed that they can get to the revival on time, and so they prayed, and that tow truck showed up just in time to get the vehicle towed, and just in time for Brother Jimmy to arrive at the revival. And the words that preacher spoke were the exact words that Brother Jimmy needed to restore his faith. Something minuscule, something that's like, but like, that's the greatest tragedy, that they've experienced. It seems like they, I've met, they have health conditions, and people get sick and get put into the hospital, and and they'll pray for that person. And don't get me wrong, cancer and other health circumstances are traumatic, and and hard. um I guess I would say that at worst, that's what the kind of problems they're dealing with, because they remain in that bubble. So people like me, they will kind of keep at a distance. I made up a phrase last night. I'll try to remember it. Pray and stay away. That's their, not their motto, but it's their unspoken motto, right? It's like pray and stay away. So people that, like myself, that don't have the tools, resources, community, and I'm just coming out of the trailer park, and I don't have the ability to acclimate to their culture at their level. Someone like me, the philosophy, it's unspoken, right, is pray and stay away. Let the Lord work with him, for him. Like, and then it's almost as if, like, once I got the money, and I show up to church in a regular decent vehicle, and my clothes look a little bit better, and I've proven myself worthy, then I could slowly become acclimated into the community without the skeptic eyebrow raise. Until then, until I can prove that I'm this guy showing up with my hair parted to the side, and gee golly, leave it to be beaver kind of demeanor, or like I come from Mayberry. Until I can show up like that for a long time and gain their trust, and my socioeconomic level, financial level, reflects that of someone who is normal and just like them, it'll be pray and stay away, kind of. And back then I didn't to some degree I felt it, but I didn't really understand it completely. But anyways, so that's why church appealed to me, right? Because I wanted to become part of a, wholesome communities that work together. They're not drama. They're not, you know, as opposed to the world that I lived in the trailer parks, and then at school, public school, around, everybody, trying to impress each other. And I never, it seems like the people now lately, there's been a lot of people online, a number of people online that have lost the faith or don't believe anymore. And it seems like, I don't know, but they don't seem like they're out here going, well, now that I'm not a Christian, let me smoke and do the drugs and, be like everybody else, and let me find out how many people I can go hook up with. It's like, I don't see them, doing that necessarily, but I'm just now beginning to see people like that online, right, pop up, like, but it's almost like people feel like they got to rebel, like, against the Christianity, and do things that reflect the world, as if the world had something better, right? This world is shit. It's still shit, and I still don't want to be part of it. But I was also a reject in the Christian churches, so not going to be part of those communities or networks. But I also fail to, I often talk about on my channel how, like, part of the secular world, the unspoken, the silent undercurrent, the unspoken, way reality works is how it, I'm not going to dissect it down in this video, but a lot of your assimilation into the secular world has a lot to do with drugs, drug culture, and weed, and party, and smoke, and all that. It truly is, right? It truly is. It is a huge part of acclimating to the world. It's an unspoken thing. Everybody, low-key, during certain phases in their life, they do all the drugs and smoke and party and get drunk, and it's all part of life, as they say. And like the stupid bitch from KV, I think it's KVJ radio show or something like that, Virginia. She said something to the effect of, more people need to get out there and make those bad decisions because they make the best stories, paraphrasing there. But daily in the news, I hear people going out there and making all these stupid decisions, and because they're partying. And then daily, like, I see the headlines, like, every day on the news, there's always some kind of person who was, partied and went and, killed somebody. Like, recently, it was a cop. I was just listening to this last night, watching this last night. She's a cop, and she went and got drunk and not hit a guy, killed him while he was on a motorcycle. Or the teenage girl who fell asleep after partying while drunk, with both of her legs bent backwards, and she's so drunk she got knocked out that, like, it cut the circulation to her legs, and then she had to get her legs amputated as a result. And then the people that become addicts and stuff, and, like, the whole world is glorified, and it's like an unspoken rite of passage that, like, whenever you're at a job, like, people are pinging at you to see how socially relevant you are, what's your socioeconomic status, how much they're trying to see where you stand on the social ladder. It's an unspoken thing, and they get to feel you out, get to know you, and then over time, eventually, they're gonna ask what you do for fun at your job, and then eventually they're gonna ask you, what did you used to do? It's all the time, like. what did you used to do? Just and the last long-term job I worked working for other people, I kid you not, when I got there, I was like, I wonder how long it's going to take for the weed conversation to come up. How long is it going to take where everybody's sitting around and having a conversation? Because these patterns are predictable to the point to where I'm more conscious of them. And even 10 years ago, I was conscious of them. And I said, I wonder when that conversation is going to come up where everybody brings up the weed conversation and how, oh yeah, we used to smoke weed back in the day, and you know, uh and and everybody asks each other if they used to or if they did, and they're legit. This is insane. They're legitimately curious whether or not the other person smoked weed or not. And in their heads, in my opinion, it seems like that they think that it makes them this outlier if they smoked weed. And I think that they legitimately think that they think, okay, how to explain this? You know, they act like they're going to be surprised that someone else did just like them. Like somebody else, like, oh, you did too? Oh, you did too? Oh, like as if nobody, as if only some rare few do it, right? But anyways, I'm getting too into the weeds on this, but basically, you sit around and people are trying to develop a tribal kind of rapport. Like, are you part of the tribe? Are you part of the community? Low key, like, are you part of the culture, the collective tribe? And so one of those devices used to filter you through to make sure you're just like everybody else is your past experiences, your rite of passage, which is stupid, but is whether or not you smoked weed. I know it sounds crazy, but it's like, so at that job I said, when will that conversation come up? Because I knew it was going to come up. And sure enough, right outside the warehouse door, right outside the office door in the warehouse where we mix the paint at, the regional managers, multiple of the managers and co-workers were standing around, and somebody said something about the weed. And everybody's like, did you take part in? Did you? And everybody's like, oh yeah, I used to back in the day, but yeah, because like now they got to give it up because of the job. Like, and I thought I was like, damn, like it finally happened just like I thought it would. Like, and so then everybody got to talking about how they used to smoke and or they gave it a try, and like, and those are the things that subconsciously ping to people. You wear it like a social badge. Okay, I did that too. Everybody check. You check. Okay, good. You're approved. You're someone to be trusted. You're someone that's part of the crowd. Like, okay, you qualify to be considered, relevant, and if you're not, in people's minds, it's weird. It's weird that you did not cave into peer pressure. And don't act like you did it just because, oh, you were curious. Everybody's got to polish their ego and preserve their pride. They want to be able to say, oh, I just did it because I want to. No, you didn't. You did it because you wanted to fit in. You needed to fit in. And so if you're a Christian, you feel those pressures of the society telling you what makes you of value and relevant, and you want to, the pull of that, you're feeling the pull of that, and you want to be able to say that you're part of it, and it's tribal, and there's a primitive part of your brain that feels like insecure about it, or that you would be labeled as a danger to the tribe, or a threat, or even an enemy to the tribe. If we're talking about at a certain level of human conditioning based off of evolutionary type of psychology type of programming, um, if you're not part of the tribe, then you're a potential danger to the tribe. You're a potential threat to the tribe, and so people kind of like keep you at a distance and make sure that you're not someone that is a threat. And so so doing drugs and doing a part now, people are going to raise this up and say, well, I know somebody who didn't do weed or didn't party or something like that, but it doesn't matter, because I'm talking about in general. The way of the world is like, so what a Christian will do is they will leave the faith, and the first thing they're doing is smoking and doing the drugs. They're acclimating to this value system that has been placed in front of them from the society to tell them, all right, these are the steps, what you need to do to become socially relevant, and here's all the patterns, here's what gives you value. And it's almost like they just want to become part of the world, as if the people in the world are really good, as if people are, as if all that brings any good. It doesn't. And the people, we, especially now in our current quick fix society where everybody's just impulsively trying to be relevant and fit in, and at least at minimum be up to par with the social standard that makes you be deemed as socially normal, right? Everybody's striving to, to not be a social reject, striving not to be discarded, and not like they don't want to be rejected or outed as someone who's weird, or who's, oh, something, what's wrong with him, and all this stuff. So there's this silent, energy that permeates throughout that and a program and a filter and a blueprint, or whatever term you want to use, that, and those are the guidelines to make you socially relevant. And people are grasping and clinging to assimilate it to, in order to feel the ease of the discomfort that comes with going against the grain, right? And so, I just see in the world, I just see instant gratification, quick fix society. You got to do the drugs, you got to do at least weed, you got to smoke something, you got to party, you got to, go through that phase, and then you got to go buy a bunch of stuff on credit to maintain the optics of being up to par with what everybody else is doing. Get that car payment. Look, I bought a car, even though you didn't buy the car. You just got a car you can't afford on credit, and you're wasting wasting your money with minimum monthly payments, and just to maintain, just to exert those optics to make sure everybody thinks that you're relevant, and that, and then they go and post the vacation that they're on, and just there's nothing about the world that's really great, so I don't know, is that your experience? Anyways, just, I think that's it. I think I made my point. Like, nothing about this world is great, but also nothing about acclimating to the false Christianity religion is appealing anymore after you become aware of the truth, and of what it really is. And it's just a social club. It's just another tribe to be part of, with belief systems, and you're in that crowd or you're not. your, you know, anyways, that's all I gotta say about it.